All right. Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Moltex Progress and Plans webinar hosted by OCNI. My name is Rachel Roberts and I am the Programs and Service Associate at OCNI. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. Should you have any questions for the panelists throughout the presentations, please make sure you add them in the Q&A feature window that is located at the bottom right of your screen. Please also note that this session is being recorded. I will now hand it over to OCNI's President and CEO, Ron Oberth.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning to all of our Canadian colleagues, and good afternoon for our colleagues who are coming in from overseas. OCNI, of course, is very proud to be working with Moltex in bringing to our audience today a very comprehensive progress update and planning outline to our members in the supply chain, as well as to our many companies in New Brunswick. This will be a comprehensive update on the molten stable salt reactor and waste recycling facility to be constructed in New Brunswick by Moltex for connection to the grid in the early 2030s. First of all, I want to congratulate Moltex, Rory and his team for the recent award of $50.5 million in funding from the Strategic Innovation Fund and the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Well done, Rory and team. This marks a very important step for Moltex in its journey to deliver clean, affordable, and reliable electricity to homes, industries, schools, and hospitals here in New Brunswick and beyond as they create high-tech jobs in the province of New Brunswick and as they extend that reach to other parts of Canada and then offshore. This must be a very special day for Rory and the entire Moltex leadership team, as well as the New Brunswick government, represented here today by Minister Mike Holland. Because today they are seeing their vision of a joint investment 3 years ago in bringing Moltex to Canada. And we are happy to have Sean Tupper with us today, who will represent the federal government and speak to the wisdom of that joint investment. We are astounded to have more than 1,000 participants on the line today. I think we've almost broken the WebEx system. Largest audience by far for an OCNI event. And I'll congratulate Moltex and Aaron for achieving this number and for the meticulous planning that they've put into this event. Now, since there are many on the line that may not have heard of OCNI, so for our new friends, I would like to tell you that OCNI is an industry association that represents more than 240 suppliers to the nuclear industry in Canada and abroad. Our members supply products and services to the fleet of 18 operating CANDU reactors in Ontario, as well as to the very strong performing CANDU unit operating here in New Brunswick and to reactors in offshore markets. In addition to serving the current CANDU fleet, OCNI is now committed to building a pan-Canadian SMR supply chain to support SMRs deployed or soon to be deployed in New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. We are currently developing plans to work with companies in New Brunswick that now supply other industries such as the marine, oil and gas, mining, and other industries in helping them develop the nuclear quality programs required to supply components and services to the Moltex 300 megawatt stable salt reactors in New Brunswick and to the rest of Canada, and then to export markets, building on the success achieved by Moltex deployment here in New Brunswick. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Erin Polka, Director of Communications for Moltex, and with whom I've had the privilege to work with her in her previous role in the Canadian nuclear industry. But before I do that, I want to recognize the hard work of two colleagues, Serena Harrison, the OCNI Manager of Stakeholder Relations, who worked many hours with Aaron in planning this event, as well as to Rachel Roberts, who will once again ensure that this event runs very smoothly. I also want to acknowledge the generous sponsorship of Moltex that has made this event possible. Please now join me in welcoming Erin Polka.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you very much, and thank you to the OCNI. When COVID hit over a year ago now, the OCNI really pivoted and became the go-to group for regular, high-quality virtual content, and we're really grateful for that. The industry is really grateful for that, and for everything else you folks do to support the Canadian nuclear industry. I'd like to begin this morning by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we're on today. Because we're meeting on a virtual platform, it's important to recognize the lands we all call home. And by doing this, we reaffirm our commitment to improving relationships between nations, as well as our own understanding of Indigenous people and cultures. So from coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. I'd also be remiss if I didn't wish all the moms out there a happy belated Mother's Day. Whether you're a birth mom, stepmom, foster mom, adoptive mom, or anything in between, we hope you had a wonderful day. Motherhood is one of the most difficult, unpaid, but hugely rewarding jobs out there. And like Ron said, we had 1,000 registrants to this event. When we first started organizing it, we were told to expect somewhere between 100 and 300. So we've actually over tripled what we were targeting, and we broke the system. You actually can't have more than 1,000 registrants on WebEx. So we're pretty overwhelmed by that, and also very humbled by it. And we're so glad you could all be here with us today. We're really excited to share the progress that we've made with our technology and our plans for the business. This webinar is structured a little bit differently than some you may have attended in the past. We have representatives from the governments of New Brunswick and from Canada, from the North Shore Micmac District Council, and MB Power. And then we have a whole whack of us from Moltex talking about different aspects of the business. And the reason we did that is because that's what it's really like here at Moltex. It's not just one person at the top. It's a whole bunch of us working to make this happen. And if we're successful, it's because we work together as a team to make it happen. And we're also going to need the best people in the business. So we're not secretly, trying to convince you to come and work with us. After everyone's spoken, we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes left over for audience Q&As. So if you have any questions, or if you think of any questions as we go, there's a Q&A feature in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, like Rachel mentioned. Feel free to send us your questions, and we'll do our very best to get to them before the end of the event. Our first speaker today is the Honorable Mike Holland. Minister Holland was elected to the Legislative Assembly of New Brunswick in September 2018 for the riding of Albert, and was re-elected for a second term in 2020. He was also reappointed as the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy Development following the 2020 election. Minister Holland was born and raised in rural New Brunswick, and he's been an avid outdoorsman his entire life. He, among his many accomplishments, founded a company called Resourceful Redneck, which sells outdoor gear he invented, and co-founded the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Minister Holland to start us off today. Thank you very much for being here, Minister, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Erin. It is a pleasure to be able to address such a large group. To hear that you've broken the WebEx, it speaks to the fact that we're talking about an emerging industry where there's a significant amount of interest, and it's a privilege to be able to come here and speak. When I got ready, my staff had prepared me some notes to talk about. I don't have a very long time, but as I was reading the notes, I thought, about the last almost 3 years I've had experience on this file. And my introduction to the file was a meeting that I'd had with Rory. I remember sitting in my boardroom, not having any subject matter expertise as it relates to nuclear, yet being charged with being responsible for the Department of Energy. And I remember that meeting being a very direct meeting where I felt like I had to get up to speed in a hurry. And I got to tell you, Rory had to put up with a significant amount of blunt questions. He must have shaken his head afterwards with the low level of information and education that I had. But I came out of that meeting realizing that, I had done everything I could during that meeting to deconstruct the SMR file and come away with an understanding of it. And in a very short period of time, Rory had given me the genesis of realizing that we were onto something that could be absolutely worldwide game changer as it relates to energy. I think about further from that, Rory, we had a chance. We spent the morning sitting together in Toronto when we signed the MOU that brought in other provinces related to the pan-Canadian approach to developing SMRs, other trips that we've made to talk about this. And I realized that I went from an absolute neophyte as it relates to the file to an incredible advocate. And I'm very proud of the work that Rory's done, the Moltex team has done. And I wish we could all be together. I look forward to the time when we can do that. But we're talking now with people who are all over the globe on this call, and that's pretty amazing. New Brunswick is a province that's rather small in stature. We don't have a significant population. There's a lot of areas where there are many other jurisdictions that far exceed New Brunswick in many different ways. But in this, we are poised to be a global and a world leader. The stable salt reactors, the innovative nature of the ability to deal with waste, and the ability to bring a clean, stable, and reliable form of energy when we are moving in a world that is rapidly heading towards the decarbonization of our energy generation is very exciting. And I stand as a representative of a government and a population of people who feel like New Brunswick has what it takes to be that global leader. Having a proponent like Moltex to work with has been tremendous. I deal with a significant amount of files related to energy and others, but the ability to have somebody come to the table like Moltex with data, with experience, with a plan that has got a trajectory towards accomplishing a goal is phenomenal. The work we've done with Moltex since 2015 has proven and shown that we are expanding and developing this technology, and we will arrive where we need to be. We as a government stand in support of the SMR file. I stand in support of everything that we've seen that's come across my desk as it relates to the progress and development and the progressive realization of these ideals that Moltex has embarked upon. None of that is mentioned in the speech notes that I was given by my diligent, hardworking staff. But with the few moments I had here today, it was very important for me to express the appreciation that the province of New Brunswick has for Moltex Energy, for the recognition of the work that they've put into that to get us to this point, and my unwavering commitment to seeing this project become a reality. Today is a chance to highlight a significant amount of what's been done, and I'm very much looking forward to the future times, and hopefully when we can be together in the not too distant future, when we start marking some significant milestones and proving that Moltex Energy has a game-changing technology that can affect energy generation throughout the world, and that New Brunswick can be that world leader. And showing our faith in Moltex in the early stages will yield tremendous benefits for a province that is very much looking forward to participating in that. So to all of the Moltex team, you have a tip of the hat from myself, our government, and a continued commitment to be sitting at that table and working towards realizing the goals that we all have, to see us make an impact in the world as it relates to the decarbonization of our energy generation. So appreciate being here, and I'm available for any questions as we move through the agenda, and look forward to many more times when we're sitting here talking about this exciting file.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those really inspiring and obviously heartfelt remarks. We're really grateful to have your support and your commitment, and it's really something special to have that from the provincial government, and we don't take it for granted. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Mr. Sean Tupper. Mr. Tupper joined Natural Resources Canada as the Associate Deputy Minister in November 2018. Prior to that, and I tried to memorize this, but his list of accomplishments is just too long. So here we go. Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet at the Privy Council Office, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy at Transport Canada, Assistant Deputy Minister at Public Safety Canada, Director General, Social Policy at Human Resources and Skills Development Canada, and Director General at Indian Residential Schools Resolution Canada. He's also worked at the Privy Council Office as a special advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister, providing advice on residential schools. So you might say he's got a couple qualifications. So thank you very much for being here today, Mr. Tupper. We appreciate it. And the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I listened to that list, and I think all it really means is that I'm old. But it's been an exciting time to be a public servant these last little while. I'm very glad to be here. My points that I want to deliver will reflect the ministers, I think, largely. We I think, kind of came on the scene roughly at the same time, and among our very first meetings, in my case too, was with folks from the nuclear world, and I remember vividly, not too long into my tenure here, spending a day meeting after meeting after meeting, learning about SMRs and kind of understanding the future of Canada's nuclear industry. And it was a really exciting sort of day, because it set me up very well to kind of understand the work that we needed to do at the federal level to make sure that we seize the opportunity that is here in Canada, and to understand the complete value chain that we can create in Canada. Whether it's, you know, kind of drawing uranium out of the ground in Saskatchewan, or whether it's moving to these fabulous technologies that are going to be the wave of our future in nuclear energy. It is a truly great Canadian opportunity. The other message I remember getting on that day was that I needed to remember New Brunswick. And make sure that we were building partnerships with the entire Canadian nuclear family, and that included NB Power, Moltex, and other companies that were, you know, kind of formulating that next wave, and it was exciting. Time was of the essence. That was a very clear message to me, that our competitors were getting ready to make their moves, and there was a real sense that Canada was at the forefront, and that we had opportunity because of investments from you know, provincial leadership in New Brunswick and Ontario, but also because the companies were here working with government, but working among themselves, working with our regulator, and they kind of put Canada at the cutting edge, and so time was of the essence, and COVID has really disrupted that. It's been a tough year. It's slowed down all of our work, and it certainly slowed down you know, the work that we were doing with individual companies to kind of make sure that we were providing the supports that we could. And that's why this event is so important, because it highlights yet again the work that is ongoing, the work that is going to contribute to our economic future, to our net zero future, to the future of remote communities, including Indigenous communities, where they may have cleaner, non-emitting sources of energy rather than relying on fuels like diesel. So it's just such an important part of our enabling infrastructure to be able to reach our targets. And you know, we can't forget that we already have an energy mix where, you know, 15% of our electricity is produced through nuclear power. We can't forget that that means we're displacing about 50 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year as a result of nuclear power. And so that is one of the reasons that I think we saw last fall that the government talked about nuclear as part of our future energy mix, and it was reinforced through our net zero targets for 2050. And indeed, it is why we were able to do the work we were doing in launching the next wave of work under our roadmap for SMRs. We saw most recently, as already mentioned, that the government has started to move on getting its investment dollars out there. And we were so very pleased to see the particular announcement of the $50.5 million last month that will allow Moltex to continue to work on developing its technology and contributing to this future. We were also happy as part of that announcement to see money go to NB Power and to the University of New Brunswick, again supporting that envelope of work that is happening in New Brunswick that is part of the leadership that Canada has been able to develop in a global context around SMRs. It was a real commitment from the federal government into that demonstrated leadership from the province. It reinforced, I think, the work that the 4 provinces have announced under the MOU for SMRs that bring New Brunswick, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario together. Again, the provinces that can make this happen in terms of our way forward. 2 provinces that are contributing to the technology and advancing that work, and 2 provinces who have need in terms of looking at alternative forms of energy transmission that will be clean and non-emitting and contribute to their provincial goals with respect to their future energy mix. It also, I think, frames out the contribution that Moltex and New Brunswick are making towards the action plan that I've already mentioned, the 500 concrete measures that were identified through the multiple chapters that were contributed to that action plan. I think that's a real demonstration of the commitment that the Canadian nuclear family has and really highlights the capacity of this technology as we move forward. Most recently, the government announced a further contribution to the Net Zero Accelerator. You may recall that in the fall, they announced a $3 billion new envelope that would fund new clean technologies. This was followed up in the most recent budget with an additional $5 billion, so bringing a total of $8 billion that will be available to technologies that are focused on advancing the clean agenda for the government. So we look forward to seeing future announcements through that funding envelope that will support the future of nuclear in Canada. So I just will close by saying thank you for this invitation. I'm very pleased to be here and represent the federal government and to support the work that Moltex is doing and to support with our colleagues in New Brunswick the advancement of this agenda. We think it is a very important component of how we see Canada's future energy mix, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the dialogue today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tupper. It's you know, we kind of think of you as representing the government of Canada here, and obviously with our funding announcement, we're extremely grateful to Canada for enabling us to continue to advance our technology, for support for SMRs in general, and the continued recognition that these technologies will enable us to meet our net zero goals and mitigate climate change. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the Government of Canada. Next, we have Jim Ward. Mr. Ward is General Manager of the North Shore Micmac District Council, or NSMDC, as well as the NSMDC Aboriginal Aquatic Resource and Ocean Management. As a tribal council, the NSMDC is responsible for developing skills and capacity, bridging skills gaps, providing training and orientation opportunities, addressing shortfalls in technical service delivery, and working towards the future prosperity of First Nations communities. particularly in New Brunswick. Mr. Ward himself has a substantial background in business operations, business planning, community development, and consulting. And Moltex have an excellent working relationship with Jim and the NSMDC, and we're so glad that he could be here with us today. So over to you, Jim. Thanks again.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Erin. Like I said, I just want to thank you and Moltex again for recognizing that we're all on Indigenous lands, and that, like I said, it's very respectful to recognize that. I think that's one of the main reasons that I think North Shore and our 7 Mi'kmaq bands here in New Brunswick have kind of been able to develop a relationship with Moltex, because I think Moltex is one of the few companies that really understand and what it's like to, like I said, engage and work with First Nation organizations. Like I said, I'm going to go right to the beginning when I became involved, and I'd like to thank NB Power for inviting us to a supply chain presentation that Moltex and our Canada put in place here in Fredericton. And like I said, I had the opportunity to question Rory, and after the presentation, and I asked Rory, like I said, it's important, like I said, to engage the First Nations as part of the supply chain. Like I said, there will be a lot of opportunities there. That's where the majority of the jobs. But like I said, First Nations also, like I said, would like to be have ownership in the technology and then whatever energy company results. So, like I said, Rory, like I said, this was not a project. Like I said, there was no need for the engagement and whatever, but like I said, it was a concept. And like I said, no company has ever kind of reached out to First Nations, like I said, at this early stage to, like I said, become partners. And so, like I said, Moltex, like I said, had, like I said, they realized that they need support and the partnership of First Nations here in New Brunswick. And like I said, they've reached out to us, and like I said, we've signed an MOU of partnership to, like I said, move this file forward. Like I said, here in New Brunswick and across Canada, like I said, the First Nations are amongst the poorest of the poor. And like I said, to be given the opportunity to, like I said, sometime to be a part of a project, like I said, that's groundbreaking, that's going to create opportunities and employment is, like I said, quite a limited opportunity. So like I said, it's something that the team at North Shore and our chiefs from our communities are very interested in. And like I said, not only from North Shore, but like I said, we would like to see, and Moltex would like to see, like I said, all 15 First Nations as part of the SMR file and working together to, like I said, make this happen. So that's that. On another note, like I said, here in New Brunswick, like I said, it's a older demographic. Probably a lot of people retiring in the next 5-10 years. But we look at the First Nation communities here in New Brunswick, like I said, our communities are growing. We're growing way above the Canadian average. And like I said, we have a lot of young people in our communities that, like I said, given the proper direction, like I said, and opportunities for employment, I think, like I said, we can help fill the gaps that's going to be created from all the employment opportunities of not only developing the SMRs, but developing the supply chain. So like I said, that's another area that, like I said, Moltex understands and is working with us. And same with NB Power. And like I said, there's so much potential on this file. And like I said, I'm just happy to be a part of it. And said, wish Moltex and the team well. And like I said, I like seeing the support from all the federal partners. Like I said, we've got work to do on our end to, like I said, engage the government to, like I said, become involved. Like I said, I'm glad Mr. Tupper is here, because like I said, we'd like to meet with him and to talk about different opportunities that, like I said, outside the box for financing and involving First Nations in this technology, because like I said, it is game changing. It's going to provide so much opportunity. And like I said, I'm happy, like I said, to be involved today here, representing North Shore and our 7 Micmac communities and our teams. Like I said, we enjoy working together, and like I said, we want to see it continue. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Your insights and perspectives are always so valuable to us as we continue to learn and grow. And we look forward to expanding those relationships and working together for a very long time. So thank you for being here and for your support. Next, we have Andy Hayward. Mr. Hayward is the Chief Nuclear Engineer at the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station. He's also the Director of Advanced Reactor Development, so he wears 2 hats. He's been with the Point Lepreau site for 13 years in various management roles. And prior to that, he worked in the specialty cellulose industry, which I had to Google, up to and including general management of a mill complex in northern Quebec. And he was also involved in the construction and commissioning of 2 conventional power plants. So he's got quite a broad experience, and we're very grateful he could be here with us today. And I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Erin. Speaking to you today from St. John, New Brunswick, the traditional lands of the Wolastoqey. And we'll cover a couple of topics. First, a little bit about NB Power's plans, why we chose Moltex as a partner, and a couple of words about the provincial memorandum of understanding and feasibility study that's been released recently. So as far as NB Power plans, when we reviewed our energy planning horizons, supply and demand, with respect to greenhouse gas reduction as well, examined the potential for additional nuclear generation in New Brunswick, and recognized the advantages of advanced Generation 4 small modular reactors. So we decided to form a New Brunswick small modular reactor cluster, which included 2 partners, Moltex and ARC, Clean Energy Canada. So the province and the federal government have both been very generous in their support for Moltex and ARC so far, and our plans in New Brunswick, and have contributed tens of millions of dollars to this point. Our vision is to demonstrate these advanced reactor technologies at Point Lepreau site by early to mid 2030s. And in addition, we want to establish a supply chain in New Brunswick and Canada, and act as a fleet deployment agency from New Brunswick through Canada and internationally as well. So you can go, I guess I'm not sure if the slides are following me, but yeah, let's go. So that's in New Brunswick and NB Power's plans. Why did we select Moltex? Next slide. So NB Power reviewed over 100 technologies of advanced reactors against 9 criteria. And we selected Moltex because they demonstrated a strong interest in and a commitment to New Brunswick and Canada. We're quite philosophically aligned, as Jim Ward just pointed out a few minutes ago. We as well are quite philosophically aligned with Moltex. It demonstrated some inherent safety characteristics and passive safety features we liked. It has a pretty elegant solution to one of the nuclear waste issues around spent fuel that exists in Canada with our CANDU technology, as well as around the world. The technology is a good partner for renewables, and we're an advocate of renewable energy as well. But when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you need a partner for the renewables, and Moltex acts as a good agent in that sense. The high temperature steam that's produced as part of the process is a good potential for industrial application partnerships. Some customers are not going to want grid electricity. They may want energy in a different form, and it's a good partner for that. And the economics are potentially competitive as well. So some of the few of the many reasons why we chose to partner with Moltex. And then I guess I'll go on to what I think our biggest Canadian advantage is, and that's collaboration. So we touched on a little bit today. There's the provinces, the utilities in the provinces, the provincial governments, the federal governments have all collaborated to form an action plan for the country. And this is one of our competitive advantages when you look around the world. Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, and most recently Alberta are joined in this memorandum of understanding, which started out as a roadmap, developed into an action plan, and later this summer, some details around a deployment strategy and deployment plans will be issued. One of the actions from the action plan was to develop a feasibility study, and that study demonstrated that SMRs would support domestic energy needs, curb greenhouse gas emissions, and position Canada as a global leader. So significant support as a result of that feasibility study for our plans around small modular reactors. So I think that pretty much takes up my time, Aaron, and that's all I really wanted to say. I can talk in detail to anybody that wants other information. Feel free to contact me. Thanks.
No, that's wonderful, Andy. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we asked you to cover a lot of things in a very short amount of time, but we really appreciate that, and we always appreciate your insights. So thank you. Next up, we have our CEO, Rory O'Sullivan. Rory's been with Moltex since the company was founded in 2014, and he actually moved to St. John in 2018 to set up the Canadian business. And from here on out, he'll be overseeing the international rollout of our technologies. He actually has quite a long and impressive bio, but I promised him I'd keep it short. So I am, and I'll hand it over to him to talk about our technology.
Well, thank you very much, Erin. And I really have to start saying a few thank yous because that was really a very humbling few speakers there. But really, OC and I very grateful you could host this. Minister Holland, thank you for your kind words. Really, as we've just heard, your support and the province's support has been unwavering. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Our move to St. John in 2018 was made possible thanks to the $5 million investment your government made back then. Thank you to Deputy Minister Tupper for your remarks on behalf of Government of Canada. As most of you already know, we're the very grateful recipients of just over $50 million from the federal government this past March. Money which will be well spent on advancing our technology, recruiting employees with specialized skills, expanding our research, academic, supply chain, and Indigenous partners for our clean energy future. Jim Ward, thank you for your invaluable guidance over the years. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you and your partners there. Lastly, I want to thank Andy Hayward and the MB team who've worked with us to establish our business, advance our technology, and ultimately ensure we reach our goal of commercial operation at the Point Lepreau site. So I'd like to begin by giving you a brief overview of our company, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues who'll go into a little bit more detail about each of the technology aspects and what our plans are, specifically for the two products, the SSRW and Watts. So in 2014, that was when the company was founded and the master patent was granted. Moving on over the next few years, we really developed the concept to make sure it was viable. And it was 2018 was when we partnered with New Brunswick, as we mentioned, and we established our office in St. John when we had our footings sure and our concept developed. And we looked at Canada because it had a supportive environment, the right regulatory regime, and a supportive federal and provincial policies. There was an opportunity to build the first reactor with New Brunswick Power at Point Lepreau, and other potential customers across Canada, specifically Ontario Power Generation, of course, and Bruce Power, but there's a market in Canada for low carbon energy in the decades to come. Over the next 3 years, we've hit several milestones and really expanded quite significantly. The main development has been expanding the team to focus on design, research and development, experiments, supply chain development, and stakeholder engagement. We've had major investments from huge engineering firms, specifically led by IDM, an engineering, major European engineering firm. And we had the first ever nuclear crowdfunding back, I think that was 2019, which was very successful and exciting. We've had almost $8 million from the US Advanced ARPA-E, the Advanced Funding Agency, a subsidiary of Department of Energy, to work with the US labs. And obviously recently we've had the $50 million from the Canadian government, as well as $1 million through a partnership with Ontario Power Generation. It's all very exciting, but what that leads to over those years is this is our plant. I'm going to just walk you through at a high level the facility, what it'll look like. At the very front here, you can see the reactor. This is the stable salt reactor, which produces low carbon energy and designed to be fueled by recycled nuclear waste. And this configuration shows a 300 megawatt power plant here. On the right, you can see the Watts facility. This is waste to stable salts, and it's the facility that'll convert the nuclear waste to fuel for our reactor or any fast spectrum molten salt reactor. Down the back, you can see those little blue tanks. That's called grid reserve. This is our energy storage so that we can configure the whole plant as a peaking plant to complement renewables when, as Andy said, the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. And at the back there is a larger 900 megawatt steam turbine to produce that peaking plant, peaking power. And this is the all-important slide. This is the reason we're here. On the right, that little blue bar there is our estimated capital cost. And this has been roughly the same after 3 different independent cost estimates as the design has progressed over the last 3-4 years. And the navy bars are the comparison. This is the historical capital cost of nuclear over time. And essentially, it has just become unaffordable. And we're looking to do with our innovations in the reactor technology is get back down to the low level of costs that we've seen before when you had the big nuclear rollout. But we get, with innovation, we get that high level of safety that we demand today. Next slide, please. And so, talking a little bit about the ability to recycle waste, and my colleague Simon's going to talk about this in more detail later. I just wanted to compare on the left, we have the conventional nuclear fuel cycle. So we take mined uranium, it's used to fuel a reactor, and then it gets stored typically at the reactor sites around the country or around the reactor plants around the world. And then that waste will be stored underground. And that is a safe, costed, viable plan. It works. The only challenge is sometimes there's resistance, there's social resistance to that plan, and there's still a lot of energy remaining in that waste. So what we're trying to do with our inventions is to take that small amount of long-lived waste in the spent fuel, convert it to fuel for our reactor so we can create more clean energy from that waste. At the end, we're aiming to get the final amount of long-lived radioactive waste down to at least below 1%, maybe down to 0.1%. We can't get rid of it all. It's not magic. There'll still be waste, but the aim is to significantly reduce that long-lived radioactive waste to reduce the hazard on future generations. So then talking briefly about the design, how it's configured to enable renewables. So these are these blue tanks I showed down the back. This illustration shows if we have a 300 megawatt reactor producing power 24 hours a day, the heat can then be stored in large tanks of molten salt. That's those blue tanks. We can then use that heat from the storage tanks and from the reactor together to produce higher amounts of electricity when the grid needs it. So for example, if we stored the energy for 16 hours a day, we could produce 3 times the electrical output for 8 hours a day, enabling a further expansion of renewables, which is cheaper than electric battery storage. And lastly, we often talk about nuclear power and decarbonizing the electrical grid, but with nuclear power, particularly advanced high temperature nuclear power like ours, we can decarbonize many other sectors beyond electricity. Electricity is only one part of getting to net zero. If we need to decarbonize, we need to get hydrogen, ammonia, fuel cells to decarbonize the transport industry, heavy industry, metals production, and even domestic heating. This could be done with our stable salt reactor waste burner and other high temperature nuclear plants, such as our uranium version thermal spectrum. So that's a high level overview of the technology. Just coming on to the very important point about supply chain. One of the unique attributes about these innovative new designs is that they operate at much lower pressures. So if a conventional reactor would have a pressure vessel of 30 to 40 centimeters thick, ours is 3 to 4 centimeters thick. So this really means that the amount of regular manufacturers across Canada that can now partake in the supply chain is greatly increased. The pie chart on the right shows the study that we did in New Brunswick, where over 50% of the components could be manufactured in New Brunswick facilities. To expand that, you can get over 75% with some investments to increase the capabilities of the companies here. And of course, across Canada, we see that there's very few components that couldn't be made in Canada. It's possibly only the steam turbine that would need to be imported. There's really excellent capabilities. So right now, just finish on this back one slide. Right now, we have been having one-to-one meetings with various suppliers across New Brunswick and moving into Canada. And we are developing a database. So if you're a supplier listening and you want to contact us, please send information to the suppliers@moltexenergy.com to make sure we know about you and you're on the database. So the last thing I want to say today is some news. This is a change we've made to our corporate structure with the funding and our shift to Canada. And if you just look at the illustration on the right, previously we're the UK parent company with 2 subsidiaries, Moltex Energy Canada and Moltex Energy USA. The change we've made is Canada now holds the global IP rights for the 2 technologies, the stable salt reactor waste burner and Watts. The UK company will be operating as a sister affiliate company with Moltex Energy UK and USA, setting up separate boards of directors and management teams for both companies, working closely in partnership, of course, as we move forward. This will allow separate equity investments to the various technologies that we're developing. So with that, I will hand over to Simon Newton, who is our Corporate Development Director, to talk about Watts in more detail. Simon, over to you.
Rory, thanks very much. I'm Simon Newton. I have the enviable task of telling you a bit more about the waste recycling process that we use to turn spent can-do fuel into fuel for our reactor. And in a sense, this is going to be a physics lesson, and then a chemistry lesson, and then an economics lesson, which is, I know, is the kind of day we all used to look forward to at school. I have only got 5 minutes, of course, so it'll at least be a bit quicker. And let's start with the physics. In the fission of uranium, which is a little diagram on the right, 2 things can happen. Either the uranium atom splits, releasing energy and producing fission products, or it doesn't, in which case you get the formation of larger atoms like plutonium and others which are known as actinides. And so the diagram on the left shows that the total radioactivity you get in spent fuel is a combination of those 2 things. The green line is the fission products, which are quite radioactive, but nonetheless have a relatively short lifetime, around 300 years. And the light blue line is what's known as the actinides, which includes plutonium, less radioactive to start with, but a very much longer radioactive lifetime, something like 300,000 years.
And if you can separate out those two groups, the fission products from the actinides, then you can treat them both separately. And indeed, that's exactly what it is that we are aiming to do. Erin, if you want to go on one. So WAT stands for waste to stable salt. And this is the chemistry lesson, if you like. We have a three-stage process that splits out those two groups of radioactive elements that we were just talking about. So you start with a CANDU fuel bundle on the left. Actually, just over 20% of that comes out as zirconium, which is in the cladding of the fuel and can be reused. A fraction under 80% comes out as uranium alloy, that's the light blue box there, which can be treated as an intermediate level waste. It's nearly 80% by mass, but it's an intermediate level waste. And there are some views that it might, in the future, represent a source of uranium for enrichment that might have some value. We then also get out the fission products, a little under 1%. So these are the products that I talked about that are radioactive, but with a relatively short radioactive lifetime. And those would be disposed of almost certainly in the deep geological repository. Although they can actually be used, there is a potential use for those products as they generate heat. And there's a concept called the heat battery, in which you can use that heat for various applications. And then our fuel salt, also just under 1%, contains the plutonium and the other higher actinides, which we talked about a minute ago. And so, Erin, if you move on. Now, the reason that our process is simple is that we are not trying to create pure plutonium. The effort involved in separating out pure plutonium from the actinides, which are chemically very similar, is the reason why traditional reprocessing is very, very expensive indeed. Because conventional reprocessed fuel is almost pure plutonium. Unlike other reactors, our reactor can tolerate those actinides and indeed another group of elements called lanthanides, which are or rare earth metals, which are also chemically difficult to separate. So this ought to satisfy some people's concerns about proliferation too. We don't produce pure plutonium in this process, and so the input material for our fuel is of no use in weapons. Even if you started with our fuel, you would still need a vast reprocessing plant in order to purify the plutonium to a suitable level. So in a sense, that kind of leads on to the economics, right? So as well as being safer, the process is very much simpler and therefore cheaper. An order of magnitude cheaper, in fact, which is a few $100 million compared to several $1 billion, which is the cost of a traditional reprocessing plant. And if a few $100 million sounds like a lot of money, then you have to compare that, I think, with the $26 billion that is earmarked for the deep geological repository in Canada. So our hope is that we can reduce the volume of waste so that the costs of that deep geological repository can also be reduced. So, Erin, if you want to move on one, this is the picture you've seen before. We need to do, with the money we've had from federal and provincial sources, and that we get and constantly seek from private equity backers, we need to do some serious R&D and engineering now. The chemical processes in our process are pretty well understood, and we are starting with what's known as cold cell work on those, which is using non-radioactive substitutes for the fission products. And then we'll proceed to the hot cell work, i.e. using real spent fuel with Canadian nuclear labs. So our objective is not just to prove that the process works on a lab bench, but also to engineer a commercial scale line to show that these processes can be scaled up and run both safely and cost effectively. And the moment we can do that will be a really critical moment for Moltex. That's the point at which the huge liability that is represented by spent fuel around the world becomes an opportunity to turn that into clean energy. Now look, in all of this work, our highest priority is safety. We proceed through small steps. We work very closely with Canadian Nuclear Labs, with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, with the Nuclear Waste Management Organisation, and none of this will happen if it isn't safe. But as long as it is, and as long as the process works, we have a potential solution for the disposal challenge of nuclear waste around the world, as well as a source of low-cost clean energy for Canada and for everywhere else. And I think it's hard to understate how important that could be. So look, I'll hand over to Andy Ballard now. He's going to tell you about what we'll do with this fuel in our waste-burning reactor.
Thank you very much, Simon. My name is Andy Ballard. I've got a PhD in nuclear engineering, and I've been doing nuclear new build projects since 2009. I've just got a few minutes to teach you about some of the exciting things that go on within the stable salt reactor waste burner SSRW, such as we intend to build on the Point Lepreau site in New Brunswick. First of all, the key to this is to look at the legend on the left. Effective. Effective is quite a general term. In this case, effective means, does it do the job? And can it be implemented with less complication? That's what effective means when you're talking about hazards and what are the things that you need to do to make systems safe. Forwards 1, please, Aaron, for the animation. So nuclear plants were constructed and then lessons were learnt after a few years of operating those, and you'll be familiar with some of the challenges that they faced. Now, the existing plants were made to be a safe and carbon neutral contributor to the world economy by implementing systems after they had already been designed. So the safety level was increased by adding systems. In Moltex, the next animation, please, Aaron, then we are in the fantastic and fortunate position of rethinking some of these things from the beginning. And as good engineers do, then you look at this hierarchy of controls and you ask yourself always for the most effective solution. So with some of the experience that has come from the operation of the first generation of commercial nuclear power plants, then we have managed to eliminate, and if not eliminate, then substitute all of the hazards that threaten and make complicated the design of nuclear facilities. Let's look at an example of how that has been implemented in the fuel assembly. So we can see on the left-hand side, we have the more traditional water reactor, light or heavy water reactor, where you've got solid uranium. When that uranium within this fuel pin becomes a critical mass and begins to create the power that is needed for a nuclear reactor, then it produces gases, and the gases are managed with high structural integrity metals, which are able to withstand that high pressure. And as this reaction continues, then certain things develop in the fuel, which means you need to be very careful about how you operate it. The Moltex approach, as shown on the right-hand side, says, let's make this solid into a liquid. If we do that, then number one, then we get to keep everything at a lower pressure. In fact, the same pressure as we call atmospheric pressure, day-to-day pressure, effectively. When we do that, then the byproducts, when you operate this, are not gases, which generate pressure, but more salts. And these more salts can dissolve into the molten fuel salt. And there's another couple of nice benefits to this. It regulates itself. So as it gets hotter and as time goes by, then the fuel itself actually stops the reaction as it gets hotter. There's a little bit too much physics in that one for now. So what does this look like? Well, it looks like a circular tank, and inside the circular tank are a number of fuel assemblies. The circular tank contains a coolant salt, which does not contain any fission products. Inside the fuel assembly are the fuel. Now, the fuel inside the fuel assembly heats the coolant. The coolant is pumped around to large heat exchangers by molten salt pumps. If the pumps stop working, then there is a fully passive and no power required heat removal system that actually quite simply just cools the outside of the tank with air. This is all really quite small, so that means that you do not have to build particularly complicated structures to withstand the forces that industrial facilities need to be able to withstand. As Andy, Hayward, and Rory both mentioned, then this is working at a slightly hotter regime than many of the existing water reactors, and the benefit of that is that you're able to do slightly better things with the thermal energy. You can store it nicely, and you can make some better quality steam. And then the most exciting thing is that is the technology that we're taking forward at the moment here in St. John, here in New Brunswick. So the concept design has been finalised, and we're going through the exciting transition to the engineering design process. One of the things that helps us conclude the concept design is that we have a very high expectation of having successful results on the vendor design review phase 1 here in Canada, and we'll be racing forwards to get into phase 2 as soon as possible. It's already all our Canadian partners who've made the largest contribution to us getting here. So obviously we've heard from the Watts process, who has worked with some of these great companies as well. So the Canadian Nuclear Labs, the University of New Brunswick, Kinectrics, SNC-Lavalin, and Worley, who are all local partners, have helped to get us here. We've also had to look a little bit further abroad for some of the R&D. So we've worked with some of the smartest people in the world on these subjects. That's Argonne National Labs, Oak Ridge National Labs, to name a couple in the USA, IDOM from Spain, and Jacobs in the UK have been helping with our R&D. Now, the R&D is a very, very necessary angle of work for a novel design. So that R&D will help make the substantiation that we'll make in the design, that the reactor safety functions will perform as intended in all the credible scenarios. The R&D will help us increase the level of detail and resolution of the design, which will allow us to say precisely and to a manufacturing quality what the part must look like, which helps the designers. And finally, it'll enable us to get down to a very, very high quality definition of our capital cost and the cost of operating such equipment. So in a nutshell, that's the project. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you, Andy. So hi, guys, I'm Diaz, and unlike Andy and Simon before him, who were talking about our technology, I'm here to talk about myself. I'm a chemical engineer, and I started my career as a test engineer in India, which then took me to Sweden. While there, I was based at their manufacturing unit, and I really, really liked it. But it made me realize that I was really not happy being a test engineer. So my goal was always to pursue a very dynamic career, which will enable me to contribute a tiny, tiny amount towards developing a better future. This led me to do my master's in chemical engineering from University of Nottingham in UK. It was during my master's that I first started working with molten salt. I still remember my very first successful experiment. It was really exciting and magical. Why magical? I'll tell you why. Because we have this oxide powders, and then we put this in this very, very hot as lava, like molten salt. And then we let the molten salt work its magic, and we get metal out of it. So I still have the little piece of metal I produced at the very beginning of like my very first experiment, and I'm having it with me today. So if you guys can see it, here it is. So this is, so it's like my own lucky coin. I carry it with me. So anyway, it's a process that we are trying to integrate in our WATS technology. So drawn to molten salt and its wonders, I spent the next 5 years in UK and in China working as a researcher on molten salts. So I was looking for other opportunities. Mostly I was looking into companies who are working with molten salt, and I stumbled across Moltex. Their WATS technology seemed innovative, promising, and sustainable, like all the things we need in today's world. So when I was offered a job with Moltex, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. So I was so committed with the idea of working with Moltex, like I moved half the way across the world during the time of global pandemic. Well, it's a very long story, but it's a story for another day, I guess. So moving on. So now that brings me here right now to New Brunswick in Canada, working as a research and development manager. I love being part of Moltex. It is a growing company and they have a very dynamic work environment. I'm based at University of New Brunswick. We are currently using their lab facility for our research and development. Well, as my title implies, most of the time I'm trying to validate our research ideas or undertaking more research to come up with new ideas. Other times I'm busy managing projects, making sure the projects are meeting their deadlines and they are within the budget. I also help in drafting funding applications. So as you can see, like, because it's a startup, I get to take up like various responsibilities. So I'm learning a lot as I go. I get to wear various hats, which I personally like really love, because there is a constant change and there is no time for me to get bored. Okay, thank you so much today, guys, for having me here and letting me talk about myself, because like, who doesn't want to talk about themselves? So thank you once again, and I'm gonna hand this over to my dear colleague and my teammate, Jose Juninga.
Thank you very much. And thank you, OC and I, for hosting this webinar. It is a pleasure to be here today. And to our listeners today, good afternoon. My name is Jose Zuniga, and I am the R&D chemist for Moltex Energy Canada. As a chemist, I support experiments and thermodynamic modeling, which investigate and predict molten salt chemistry, and oversee R&D activities in Canadian nuclear laboratories and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I hold a master's degree in chemistry from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and have published multiple scientific articles in international journals in the field of luminescence, energy, and radiation material science. I'm originally from Mexico, but I spend most of my time in Texas, so I'm used to a very much warmer climate than Canada. You could literally cook an egg on top of your car hood or bake some cookies on the inside. When I was recruited by Moltex, it was a very exciting moment because as a recent graduate, I was given the opportunity to contribute to the fight against climate change, a problem which has been eating up our planet slowly. As a father, I realized that I was in trouble. Why? Because in my view, over countless of decades, we have passed old problems to newer generations. And with every passing year, we have become desensitized to the issues that we keep on passing along. I refuse to pass along to my daughter a dying world that uses energy sources that are worse than a sinking ship. The world we know it is like the Titanic. It is vast and high-powered, but it lacks enough lifeboats. If we do not change the course on how we produce energy, disaster, perhaps catastrophe, is almost inevitable. On some level, we know we're the Titanic. We just don't know we've been hit. So I generally believe we must change the way we produce energy for our communities if we want to reverse the damages already done by our current energy production habits. Changing course is not easy, especially when the damage is already done, and only a disruptive technological advancement can put us back on track. Moltex is developing a nuclear technology that will change our world and help us achieve net zero. For this reason, I joined Moltex because I wanted to be part of the solution and make my daughter proud. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening today. I know I have a short amount of time, so now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Ryan Brown.
Thanks, Jose. Hello, my name is Ryan Brown, and I'm a mechanical engineering graduate working here with Moltex Energy. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the work culture here, one that I find to be incredibly unique. Due to the specialized nature of what we're trying to accomplish, we we've gathered experts from around the globe. I get to sit across from people who have risen to the top of their field and who've been working in this complicated and specialized discipline since I was in diapers. This is the type of collaboration that you only see in these types of small growing companies, and ones are typically reserved for startups in Toronto or Silicon Valley. I get to work directly with and collaborate with people who, in any normal company, would be many levels above me and inaccessible to someone at my level. To be able to work in this field alongside these types of people in my hometown of St. John, I honestly still have trouble believing it. I love that every day I get to directly apply the knowledge I've learned in school, doing calculations and research that directly relates to my field of study. I've even been able to integrate some of my own interests into this project. I've always been interested in robotics, and a few years back, I built my own 3D printer. Well, aside from using it for my own projects over the years, I've gone to use it here at Moltex, printing a 3D model of Moltex's Reactor in Moltex's colors to help us visualize it as we design it. You can see that it flips apart and comes together, as you can see here. It's things like this where I get to bring my own interests into the project that really make the work enjoyable. And the work that we're doing, aside from being fascinating, is important. Everyone has heard of the dangers of climate change and the challenges to mitigating it. But the technology that we're developing here has the potential to make a real difference against this global threat. The people at Moltex Energy know what they're working against, and I see the passion that each person here puts into their work every day I come to the office. Climate change is a terrible and growing problem, but I feel honored to be able to play my part in combating it with such a talented and passionate group of people. Well, thanks for listening. Aaron, back to you.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you, Jose and Bias and Andy and Simon. You know, this webinar is called Progress and Plans, but I think we might as well have called it Progress, Plans, and People, because quite frankly, you can have, you can make excellent progress and have ambitious plans, but success really comes down to who you have working with you. And at Moltex, we're really lucky. We have a group of ambitious, dedicated, hardworking women and men working to make our dreams a reality. And we're in growth mode. You know, in the next year, we're targeted to double in size and then double again the following year. So, you know, we're going to be hiring. And the nuclear industry in general is in growth mode because of SMRs. And New Brunswick, like Minister Holland spoke to, and some of the speakers before me, is poised to be the next big hub for nuclear workers and for supply chain activity. So, you know, if you're a recent graduate and you're thinking about your first career in the nuclear industry, or if you're a seasoned employee who's looking for their next big challenge, think about coming to work with us. There's definitely going to be a lot of opportunity in the coming months and years. And if you're a supplier who thinks that they can help us meet some of our capability gaps, let's sit down together and see what comes of it. And if you're a supporter, just a plain old supporter of new nuclear technology and the many social, environmental, economic benefits that goes along with it, then talk about us to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues, to the media. Tweet about us. It really doesn't matter, but help us get the word out there. And that's really going to make a big difference for us. And so that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Ron to moderate some of the questions that I can see are already starting to filter in. If you haven't already sent us a question, a reminder again, the Q&A features in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Send us your questions, and if we don't get a chance to answer them during the live event, we have about 15 minutes left. So if we don't get a chance to answer them, we'll make a point to follow up with you after the event. So Ron, over to you, and thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. And wow, am I impressed with the impassioned international and diverse group of people that you've assembled and are continuing to assemble. You guys really have become a magnet for talent from around the world. And if I were 20 years younger, I think I would be sending you my application. And Rory, of course, would teach me how to fish in New Brunswick. But Aaron, I must throw one more thing at you. And I know we didn't talk about that in our agreement, but as part of this webinar, Moltex has guaranteed that New Brunswickers across the whole province would be supporting the Toronto Maple Leafs in their quest to return the Stanley Cup to Toronto after 54 years.
It's not going to
I
happen.
see you're shaking your head, Aaron, but I'll pull out the paperwork that someone signed for Moltex. Maybe it wasn't you. But anyway,
No, I never would have signed that.
Okay.
And if that's the case, we're going to have to tear up the contract.
Sounds like you're a Maxwell fan. So what can we do about that? So my first question is actually for Andy Hayward. Andy's a supply chain veteran of the industry. And the question for Andy, which was posed by one of our participants, is what can the nuclear industry do, and in particular the supply chain, to bolster SMRs and Moltex in Saskatchewan, or how can we effectively help to build a strong New Brunswick supply chain?
Okay, sure. Thanks, Ron. First, I'll just point out that most of New Brunswick is geographically closer to Boston than it is to Toronto. We'll save that discussion for another day. So I think what the nuclear industry can do, and suppliers in particular, there's many things we have to keep doing and some things we have to accelerate the pace of. I mentioned collaboration when I was speaking earlier. I do believe this is one of the greatest Canadian advantages. So, OCNI is very well positioned to help everybody collaborate. We need to continue refining our efforts towards only a couple of technologies, so that when we want to compete internationally, we're not separating or splitting our attention. So that's one thing. Continue the collaboration. Regulatory flexibility, although it's not necessarily controlled by or can be contributed to by suppliers, but it's another Canadian advantage. The regulator has been and continues to commit to be flexible, practical, and safe, of course. So that needs to continue. Engagement and information, that's one thing that suppliers can do. Continue to ask questions, contact us, engage as much as you can, engage with Indigenous peoples, engage with your partners in the supply chain. Let's take advantage of the talents that already exist and do what makes sense for each of the suppliers to do your part. We got to keep the customer needs in mind through all of this, because sometimes you get a great technology and you want to fit the technology to the customer as opposed to satisfying customer needs with the technology. So we have to keep that in mind. And I think, we're going to continue to need investment. So if people are like the idea, we need private investment as well as the continued government investment because we're a developing technology. So I think hopefully I've answered your question, Ron. If you have any other questions related to it, I'd be happy to try that too.
No, thank you very much, Andy. And I think you raised a point that I also wanted to bring up. It's not only building a pan-Canadian and a New Brunswick supply chain, but ensuring that supply chain has a large Indigenous participation. And so we'll be working with Jim Ward and his people to ensure that we can do the best we can to ensure that there are Indigenous companies or Indigenous peoples find exciting jobs in the supply chain in New Brunswick. But you raised the point about money. The world doesn't go very far without money. So my next question is to Rory, who knows a lot about money from his career. I think the first time I met Rory, we were talking about money in some exciting way it was here in Toronto, actually. But what can governments do? But I guess governments and private sector, how can we directly participate and financially support or invest in the development of SMRs and Moltex in particular?
Thanks, Ron. Well, in terms of the finance, of course, what's unusual with nuclear power is it's always been led by governments historically, and our competitors internationally are entirely government funded. So what we needed to be able to kickstart the program was that support from the government generally. So we initially had that from the province. We've now had it from a little bit from Ontario, and of course the major investment from the federal government. So now following this, we have funding in place to accelerate and keep going, but we'll always be raising private finance, and we're going into a new funding round now as well. But that typically, due to the regulations, it's typically more focused to larger entities. We did the first crowdfunding a few years ago. We were able to enable the public to invest, and we're pretty keen to do that again in a few years' time so that people can, anyone can invest. There's been questions in the dialogue about, would the company go public? And we've looked at it, and I think we're probably still considering it, but we really need to be a bit further on to make that, for that to make sense. We've got to have be much closer to power on, but there is a lot of interest around that. In terms of government support, the key is really to make sure there's no policy inhibitors that could make development more challenging than it needs to be. For example, between 5 and 7 years for an environmental license period is not compatible with a climate crisis or getting to net zero by 2050. And then the other one is making sure that nuclear falls into the definition of clean energy, or low carbon energy at least, like wind, solar, and other renewables. The government need to make sure that there's a platform for risk sharing, and the risks are evenly shared across the various stakeholders.
Thank you, Rory. I'm going to build on the Indigenous comment that I made earlier and that Andy partially answered, because we've got Jim Ward with us this morning. So I want to specifically ask, I guess it's afternoon now in New Brunswick. I want to ask Jim, what can we specifically do to ensure that Indigenous peoples in New Brunswick and in his communities benefit from the new nuclear deployment in New Brunswick?
Hi. Like I said, I think first thing you can do is, like I said, reach out. Like I said, became engaged with Moltex and the technology because, like I said, we have partners such as MB Power that are, like I said, realize, like I said, Indigenous communities need to be a part of like any resource development in any province across Canada. And like I said, since this was a new one, that like I said, I had to participate with another staff member, a biologist that's like I said, he took the Indigenous clean energy training, and so he has a little bit of background. And we participated, and we were, like I said, surprised with the technology. A lot of it falls in line with our kind of thinking, and like I said, we know what the government's kind of mandate is with green energy and being carbon neutral. So like I said, it falls in line with everything we believe in. The thing is our problem, like I said, our communities are among the poorest of the poor. And like I said, we don't have the funds to, like I said, invest in a lot of companies or invest in a lot of technology. So like I said, Moltex is working with us to, like I said, look at those different opportunities, and like I said, work with us to, like I said, hit the federal government and others to, like I said, invest, because like I said, that's really the main way that we're going to be involved. Advantage we do have is, like I said, we have a lot of young people in our communities that don't have a lot of direction and a lot of opportunities to, like I said, be employed. So like I said, I think working together, we can identify the opportunities. We have the funds for training and skills development. So like I said, we know there's opportunities there that we can, like I said, help guide our youth to take advantage of these opportunities. Like I said, we're New Brunswickers to, like I said, invest in New Brunswickers. This is, like I said, something that's a major opportunity happening here in New Brunswick. And like I said, we all want to be a part of it too, because like I said, we realize, like I said, this is new technology, it's game changing, and it's an opportunity we want to be involved in.
Jim, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to highlight the fact that just last month, OCNI received a grant from the Ontario government of almost $500,000 to work with Indigenous communities in the region around Bruce County to place young Indigenous people and women in the nuclear industry. And I'm very proud to introduce today, she's on the line, Terry Lynn Woods is our new manager of Indigenous engagement and special projects. She's going to be leading the Bruce County project. And I think that's a great model for what we could do in New Brunswick, is to help attract young people, give them some training and some tutoring so that they can qualify to pass the entrance exams into some of the union positions, and then ultimately place them across the supply chain in New Brunswick that's going to be helping Moltex build their stable salt reactor and their waste to stable salt facility. So it's a good model, and I'll be talking to maybe people in the New Brunswick government about how we can replicate that. What's going to happen in Ontario, replicate it in New Brunswick. Staying on the topic of money, I'm going to go back to the money guy, Rory, and say, what can you tell us specifically about how you've got the tough task of spending $50.5 million effectively to support your ambitions? So can you tell any specifics you can give us today, Rory?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a clear plan how to move forward. The funds will enable us to continue design and R&D activities, hire employees with very niche specific expertise, up to 48 is the plan, and obviously expand academic partnerships across Canada and our other research partners with various labs. We have a very innovative technology, and we have to make sure there's no stone unturned, and we've verified every aspect of it. So the commercial and technical milestones that we're going to get to over the next 4 years, which is the period of funding here, is successful demonstration of the Watts process for recycling spent fuel, validation of a reactor coolant and fuel assembly thermal performance, agreement on the commercial structure of the first plant with MB Power and the various other stakeholders or investors related, and completion of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's vendor design review phase 2. And in parallel, MB Power are going to be working on their early environmental and licensing activities as required. Exciting times ahead.
Wow, so that's an ambitious program. I mean, a quick question. You've obviously attracted some talent from around the world. How have you been, what technology have you used? I guess with social media, the outreach is worldwide, to attract people from as far away as India, Mexico, and I'm sure there's more and more young people from around the world who want to come to New Brunswick to join this exciting team.
Yeah, well, we absolutely have great talent, and we get a lot. We think it's a very exciting project. I think a lot of other people do too. So we have had a lot of applicants, but really it's our website, LinkedIn, social media presence is growing, and the word, people who are interested in this, young people in universities are spreading the word themselves. So they're hearing about it. One person applies and then they tell their friends. So obviously we'll give a final plug there, but careers@moltexenergy.com, we could unashamedly send that request out again. Thanks.
Did you tell Jose that the average temperature in New Brunswick is about 30 degrees 12 months of the year? Is that
Jose got here, it was the first time he had ever seen snow, as far as I recall. So it was a bit of an adjustment, but they've settled in very well as of the others. No, he knew.
Well, I guess if an Irishman can survive a New Brunswick winter, that's motivation in itself. So have you just defined for your investors and for your team just what success is going to look like? If we're having this discussion 3 years from now or 5 years from now, what do you think we'll be talking about?
Success for us is a massive rollout of reactors around the world, resulting in a meaningful impact in reducing global emissions. So that's a long-term vision, but first we have to demonstrate that it does what it says in the tin. We'll do this by extensive experimental plans and activities, followed by, of course, the full-scale demonstration in New Brunswick. So this will allow us to demonstrate our technology and the economic and clean air benefits that go along with it. So it's really first New Brunswick and then the world.
Well, that's a good place to start. Have any questions come in, Aaron, that you think should be, we don't have a lot of time, so we have to pick the really pertinent questions that we can nail in a short period of time?
Well, I think we might be running out of time, Ron. And, I see 63 questions in the queue. So I don't think we're going to get a chance to get to all of them. But I will commit to everyone who's asked something today that we will get back to them by email, and we have everybody's email. So we will make a point to answer everybody's questions.
Okay. Well, let me just then close by once again applauding the vision of the New Brunswick government and Mike Holland in making that co-investment 3 years ago. And it was a co-investment because Moltex and its team had to put up the same amount of money. So that was a very visionary decision 3 years ago for a guy, Mike, who was new to the energy field, but boy, you've been a quick study. It must have been that first meeting with Rory that really turned your thinking in the right direction. So I applaud you guys for that vision. And I also want to commend Sean Tupper and his team at Enercan and the rest of the federal government for making that bold step to take Moltex and clean energy in New Brunswick to the next level. This is the kind of leadership that we should all be proud of at both levels of government. And it's wonderful to see the collaboration across the Canadian nuclear supply chain. Appreciate the opportunity that OCNI has to partner with Moltex and to work with Moltex and New Brunswick organizations to build a strong New Brunswick supply chain, and one that embraces Indigenous peoples in the best way we can to ensure that everybody benefits from this great technology. Aaron, wonderful working with you again. You look very happy and content in your beautiful, I guess you're still in Ottawa, but one of these days you will be eating lobster, and I expect to get some lobster shipped up here to Ontario, because we don't have a lot. We may have a Stanley Cup champion, but we're a little bit light in good lobsters. And even though Boston is closer to New Brunswick, I would have thought that Canadian blood would be stronger than geography. But anyway, you guys can cheer for who you want. And I wish you all wonderful success in New Brunswick with Moltex. This has been a great event. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks to everybody that pulled it together. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, everybody.